I don't have the dog in the studio with me at the moment, so I thought the next best thing to having the dog in the studio is a cute story about a baby. So let's have a look at some of the borders reopening. This is Auckland Airport. Things like grandparents meeting their grandkids for the first time, etc.
She doesn't know it,
I mean,
but it's
not
a
as cute
big
as my
day
dog, but
for baby Sky.
Excited to see Nana? Yeah. Yeah.
Last time the family was over, was at our wedding. Since then, we've bought a house or built a house. Had this little one. Yeah, it's definitely been tough.
Yeah, Sky was born 4 days before the big lockdown in August as well, so we had no friends to visit for the first 3 months of her life either.
Now that's about to change. Nana's landed.
I think when she woke up, she texted us probably about 7 o'clock in the morning her time, just to say that she was landing at 11 o'clock on the 2nd of May, which I think is the earliest she could have gotten here coming from Scotland.
And just like that, she was. Months of separation melting in seconds. Gillian meets her first grandchild for the first time.
What's it been like?
yeah, I mean, you can't deny that's delightful imagery, isn't it? I mean, beautiful imagery, and it does go on as well. Here's New Zealand Herald. That we don't need to put the sound on this one, but here's New Zealand Herald out doing the same sort of thing. People meeting people for the first time. Actually, there was one that's really interesting. And this is, I think, there's a couple who'd never met each other. They'd obviously met on the internet. She's from America, he's from New Zealand, and they'd never met. I think.
Our granddaughter, so
more grandchildren, grandparents,
We've seen each other.
meeting
I
at the
haven't got to see
airport.
this.
I think it's this one. What's this?
from Texas, America. I met a few times before, but I've never been able to come here.
I've met a few times before, but there you go. So nice stories happening.
Yeah, there's gonna be so many. As someone currently teaching students to write long form sort of feature creative non-fiction journalistic pieces, there's going to be so many sort of stories, untold stories about the last couple of years of COVID in terms of separation and this sort of thing. Like, I didn't even think till I was watching the British show Ambulance the other day that there, for 9 months in the UK, people couldn't see, for example, their dying relative in the rest home until they gave them a half an hour in the room with them before they died and that sort of thing. Like, just stories like that you don't, unless you're in that situation, it might not necessarily crop up unless, I don't know, maybe you've got really good imagination. But just the untold suffering, isolation, separation, loneliness, all that sort of thing underneath the surface.
Can I suggest something? This is completely a tangent, but this is what we do. I wonder as well as what this COVID has done, has exposed the European, the English colonized culture for the ugly aspect of it, how we put our old people in rest homes and run away. Because I would think in other cultures, and I've had family and friends, many cultures from all over the world. Like, I think about the Spanish culture, for example, the elderly aren't shipped off to a rest home. They're kept in the family home and looked after. And if our culture didn't ship people off to rest homes, then those sorts of stories would be less common because they'd be at home with us and we'd be looking after them. I mean, of course, you're always going to have people who need permanent care, who might need bed permanent care, who might need, medical permanent care. But just a couple of things this morning. What you just said tweaked me to think, what about all those cultures where they haven't missed out on seeing Nana because Nana lives with them? And I also was thinking as I was watching the story about we had the baby before the lockdown in August, so we didn't see anyone for 3 months. I wonder, seeing those first several months and 5 years are so formative in a child's life for the rest of their life, I wonder if that's going to do anything for that child's development, not having impact with anybody else other than mum and dad for that time period. I don't know the answer to that question. I guess we could get on the guys from the Dunedin study to talk a bit about that. Maybe they'll have some answers to that. But yeah,
that's really interesting. Yeah.
Perhaps if we didn't, throw our elderly into rest homes and go, oh, phew, I can live my life now, we then wouldn't be having all these stories about not seeing your dying elderly person, because, I mean, it might make some people shudder, but they'd pass away and die in their own bed in your own home, like they've probably done for millennia before we had a thing called a rest home.
I think, yeah, equally there will be stories like that, right? I
Sure.
think, I think in America, for example, there's a interesting sort of it's not necessarily ethnic and cultural, but often class based and geography based. That there'll be these multi-generational homes with 4 different generations of family member, and it often is a class and geography and sort of, well, I guess sort of cultural, sort of middle America, as opposed to the. And then in the UK, I'm sort of thinking again back to the series Ambulance, like these small, very small apartment houses with old people in them. So it's not necessarily an old people's home, but it's like your granddad lives in one of those little nanny flats above another flat or something like that. It's full noise isolation.
Yeah. One comment before we move on about what we just said. Takes a village. Sadly, that sentiment is lost in Western society. COVID is slowly highlighting that.
Yeah. Well, the thing you said about kids as well, we should talk. Yeah, definitely talk to a psychoanalyst or I wonder what Freud would say about a kid never ever seeing another kid.
He'd probably tie it into having sex with your mother on some level.
And he'd be right.
Let's now have a look at a concrete example of this. We had a chance to speak to Olivia Wensley from Queenstown Lakes Startup. She lives up in Queenstown and has a lot to do with Queenstown businesses. So we can talk about this aspect of the borders reopening, but I'd also like to actually talk about what this actually means for places that need tourism. So we had a quick chat with Olivia this morning, and let's have a listen to that right now, shall we? And joining us from Queenstown, lovely Queenstown, and the most beautiful place in the country to be living, and I'm always jealous when I come up and then don't want to leave, is the CEO of Startup Queenstown Lakes Trust, Olivia Wensley. Good morning, Olivia. How are you, mate?
Morena, I'm good, thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Thanks for giving us some time.
Always good to be back.
Yeah, man. Hey, look, I thought that one of the things that would be good to do is we're talking kind of around the idea of the borders reopening, and we're talking very, I guess from our side of things, from my side of things, it may not make a huge difference to my day-to-day life because of what I do and where my income comes from and that kind of stuff. But, Queenstown is probably places like Queenstown, Rotorua, probably they're the big two, actually, who are primarily driven by the international dollar. And tourism is sort of it's the number one thing in the country, but even in those places, even more so than anything. And obviously we're a Dunedin-based show, and anytime we can sing our praises of our Otago brethren, we want to do that. So let's talk to someone in Queenstown. And you are working for Startup Queenstown Lakes. I imagine are both working with businesses and alongside a lot of businesses. And I thought we should have a chat to you about what this means for Queenstown, the borders reopening. So I guess that's the first question. What does this mean for Queenstown?
Well, it's huge. And I mean, what we've seen in Queenstown the past few years after COVID, it's been really, the economic impact has been devastating. So for context, 6 out of 10 people in Queenstown rely on tourism in one way or another for their source of income. So we're heavily reliant on tourism as a region. And you can imagine how devastating that's been when suddenly there's no tourism. Tourism's dried up overnight. Average hotel occupancy rates in the past, in recent times, have been averaging about 15%. So that sort of gives you an idea of how bad it's been for a lot of companies. Yeah. So it's been devastating and silent. It's sort of an analogy that I say, it's like our Christchurch, but it's been because just with the devastating impact to the business community, but it's invisible largely, except for the people on the street. You can't see the tourists. So that's been
that's an interesting kind of
the only visible part of it.
A parallel to draw that your financial aspect, your input, your finances, your money has been impacted like a natural disaster. So I
Yes,
never,
it
never
has
thought
been a
of that.
disaster. It's been,
Yeah.
an economic disaster. And the reason for that is because, I mean, obviously, Queenstown Lakes has been so heavily focused on tourism because of its natural beauty. It's been a great draw card for international tourists, but there's been very little economic diversification, which is a form of insurance against economic disasters. So so that's been quite interesting. We've literally had all our eggs in one basket, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
just seeing what's happened now, it's been tricky. And it's also been hard as well, sort of getting the sympathy from other towns, or lack of, because there is this perception that that Queenstown, it's boo-hoo, privileged Queenstown. It's like, actually actually there's a lot of people here that, I mean, the average wage is less than the national average. So it's not rich white Queenstown. It's actually, there's people here that really struggle, and they've been very badly affected by lack of tourism in our region.
Yeah, because obviously it might be a big, beautiful 5-6 star hotel, but someone's still got to scrub the toilets, and that
That's
person
right.
there is not a Peter Thiel of this world.
That's right.
So, having
Yeah.
having been up there 2 or 3 times in the last 12 months,
Mhm.
when you say 15% occupancy in the hotels, it doesn't look like a lot of the hotels have shut down and gone away. Have they managed to
Mm.
kind of sneak through? Has there been a lot of businesses having to fold up because of the last 2 years?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, I've been really impressed with the resilience of a lot of operators, and a lot of people just sort of really thinking about how they can get different revenue streams. There's been a lot of domestic tourism, which has been good, sort of more than usual. But it's a very strange time. Like, for example, that just a few days ago, the last day of school holidays, the airport has been the busiest that I've ever seen it, even at peak
Wow.
tourism times. So that's really odd. But then I guess it's the stability. There's not that sustained levels of tourists coming through when you don't have any international market. It's relying on domestic tourism only. So in terms of hotels, I know that a lot of places are operating on skeleton staff. It's really, I really feel for people that are trying to operate businesses at the moment on, you can see it. Almost every place in town has a sign up saying, "We're short staffed, please be patient." And it's really sad.
What about, seeing we're talking about the reason for this being COVID, the actual
Mhm.
COVID situation in Queenstown? I obviously keep an eye on the Southern DHB numbers. I've rallied about
Mm.
it a little bit on this show that, we're in orange now, yet we're still 2 to 3 times what the healthy, quote unquote, healthy range should be of numbers per day. And it
Mm.
seems that within Southern, Invercargill and Queenstown have disproportionately high numbers of COVID cases to the population.
Mm.
Is
Mm.
that, as you understand, is that still the case now? Is that impacting the economy and the environment, not environment as in trees, but the Queenstown environment, still today? Is it still going strong, so to speak?
Yes, yes. So I'm sort of seeing it rolling through companies and places like my kids' daycare, where they've got no teachers, so we have to have our kids at home, or just, you see those sort of knock-on effects. And so what's happening is, because there's a lot of because of the required isolation for household contacts, a lot of the younger workers, a lot of them flat together in quite sort of,
Yeah,
there can be flats that are quite condensed, like Dunedin.
yeah.
And so you know what I mean. Like, it's sort of, there's a lot of them living together. So when you've got that, it's quite easy for them to for COVID to spread, and for them to get to do the isolation period, even if they're not sick themselves. So there's that knock on effect.
Are people of Queenstown kind of, rubbing their hands together right now? Is there an expectation that we're going to see tourism and income like exponentially go up over the next few weeks and months, or are people around Queenstown more kind of thinking realistically, what it'll be a slow trickle?
See, that's going to be the interesting test. Nobody knows. And I personally don't think that tourism will come back to the same levels as it was, not for a long time. It's just, there's going to be real issues with what we're seeing now is a talent crunch, essentially. So Queenstown Lakes has been very, very heavily reliant on tourism workers, migrant workers to support tourism. and they've all gone home. So it's going to be when the taps do turn on again, there's going to be some real pressure, a crunch for talent, essentially, and we're going to see people really struggling to sort of get things going again. It doesn't just happen overnight to be able to take all the dust cloths off everything and get the hotels fully operational again. It's going to be challenging for a lot of people.
I think it's been cool as well, and I mean, this is one of the reasons I've been up there a few times in the last 12 months, that it feels like on some level, local tourists like me have been able to support on some level, and also businesses in tourist areas, be it Queenstown or other places around the country, have acknowledged that by kind of making it more affordable for someone to come to some of these nice places. So I'm guessing people are going to be stoked to think about that international dollar coming back when it does happen. Do you know if any? I could have done this research myself, but I haven't. Do you know if any international flights have literally landed in Queenstown yet?
I don't actually, to be honest. No, I don't think that there has, because there'd be quite a big deal of it made locally. I haven't seen any news of that yet, but I'm sure as soon as it does, it will be.
Because the news is always,
very
here we are at Auckland Airport. Look at these people coming back at Auckland Airport. It's Auckland Airport. It's Auckland Airport. But actually, I mean, everyone wants tourists, but I guess, like we said at the start, Queenstown, Rotorua, those sorts of places are the ones who are primarily dependent. So you're saying 60% of the people in Queenstown are dependent on the tourist dollar, which goes to show
I
what
mean,
happens.
that's a problem. That's a real problem, that there's a town so heavily reliant on that. And I mean, tourism's wonderful and it's great, but it's also very low productivity and it's extractive as an industry. So I know that there's some people that would like to just see tourism continue to grow and grow and grow, but that's unsustainable. So there's been discussions, I mean, with the current government as well, so talking about this tourism reset and sort of rethinking our approach to tourism, whether it's regenerative tourism, whether it's, there's all kinds of things that's being talked about. And I really hope to see that things aren't done how they have been in the past. There needs to be new ways of thinking so that it is sustainable for future generations, because at the rate of growth that's been going, it just hasn't been.
Just to wrap up, I guess, and not really necessarily talking about Queenstown, but what you do as a CEO of Startup Queenstown Lakes, and for people who aren't quite clear, the way I think about startup groups is kind of an ecosystem for new businesses, often involved in the tech world now, but generally for new businesses. Does that mean that you've seen an increase in business in the last couple of years? Because like the diversification that hasn't happened in the tourism industry might have been an opportunity for someone to go, oh, I've always wanted to try X, whatever X is. And have you seen an uptick in business for startups?
Yes, absolutely. So sort of as soon as lockdown happened, we had a huge spike in people wanting to start businesses. A lot of people that lost their jobs, they thought, okay, I've got nothing to lose now. I'm going to go and chase my dreams, which was great. What was interesting is women were disproportionately affected by redundancies, and those stats reflected in the stats that we had in our courses. So we had at one stage, at our highest stage, we had 75% of participants were women. So it showed that women losing their jobs would come and do a startup, which was awesome.
Any like incredible success stories that come to mind about your startup groups in the last 2 years?
Oh, I mean, there's so many. It's actually just really, really exciting to see what's happening. I mean, that's a huge question, because there's just in terms of capital being raised, there's some really, really exciting stuff happening. One I particularly like is a company that got a hemp strain which does phytoremediation. So what it does is it pulls heavy metals out of soil. So that's really cool, because it's it's biotech, but it's sort of it's really sort of, it's going to change the world. So and that's what's awesome about what we do.
Brilliant. CEO of Startup Queenstown Lakes Trust, that's Olivia Wensley. Hey, thanks for joining us, mate. Really appreciate talking to you, and thanks for a little bit of a insight into, I guess, if not our main tourist area in New Zealand, certainly one of our main tourists, and what these borders reopening will mean for you guys.
Great. Thanks, Pat. Nice to see you again.